Welcome to the podcast.
歡迎收聽
요거서 팟캐스트에
به پادکست ما خوش آمد.
مقیم با این پادکست
欢迎来到我们的播客
Benvenuti sul podcast
Willkommen beim Podcast.
日本からこんにちは
Buongiorno
你
dall'Italia
好来自香港
Hello from New York.
Hallo aus Deutschland.
Shalom Israel
Hello, world culture enthusiasts. We're back in another episode of Crossing Cultures, a podcast where guests from all over the world talk about subtle, surprising, intriguing, and bizarre cultural differences in everyday life. My name is Asaf, and today I'm honored to be the odd man out because today we're talking about women in the workplace, and I have this amazing panel of strong, beautiful women from Brazil, China, Taiwan, the United States, and Austria. Before we start, I want to ask you guys listening, if you're watching this on Facebook, then please head over to our page and give us a thumbs up. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then please consider subscribing maybe. And if you're watching this anywhere and you're enjoying the podcast, then please show your appreciation by liking and sharing and telling a friend that might enjoy it. We appreciate that a lot, and it helps. Let's start with you guys. You girls, you women, I don't know how to start this. I usually say you guys, but today it sounds inappropriate. So let's just have you introduce yourselves.
Sure. I'm Sarah. So excited to be here. I'm originally American and came to Israel, for about 4 years ago after spending a long time in Korea and Hong Kong, and now I spend my time between Israel and New York City.
Hi everyone, my name is Peggy. I came to Israel back in 2010. So this year is my 9th year in Israel. I'm from China, northeastern part, very close to Russia and North Korea. So it's minus 30 in the winter kind of place.
What's the name of the city?
Changchun.
Changchun. Okay.
Yeah. So I studied abroad in London and worked a little bit in the United States. And now I'm living in Israel as a resident.
Hi, my name is Andrea. Originally, I come from Taiwan. And 3 years ago, I moved to Israel because I really love Israeli mentality and entrepreneurship. So I started as an MBA student in Tel Aviv University, and then now I stay here for my job in a high-tech company.
And wait a minute, Sarah, how would you define the industry you work in? Is it tech? Is it international relationships? What?
Yeah. I work in a tech startup, so yeah, we're technology and social enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
So we're technology with a mission.
All right. And Peggy?
Yeah, I work for the high-tech industry. It's a high-tech company, but is no longer at the startup stage. I would say it's a mature company. It's an operating business.
Okay.
So for my company, it's a high-tech company. Like, they started as a startup, but right now we have more than 500 employees.
All right.
Globally.
Because we're going to talk about women in the workplace, so I just want to kind of set the boundaries of what kind of industries we're talking about. All right.
Hi, my name is Caroline. I'm from Brazil. I did Aliyah 4 years ago. I'm Jewish. I got married 3 years and a half ago with an Israeli, Oren. He's here also. I work in business consulting firms. I also always worked in business consulting firms also in Brazil, and also I'm working here in Israel. It's not high-tech, but it's a startup.
Heavy industry or accounting?
Now I'm working on a project in a factory.
Okay.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Tanya. I am originally from Austria, but kind of Israeli in my heart. So the first time I came here 4 years ago was love at first sight. I'm not Jewish, although I kind of feel like it. I don't know why, but would make my life easier. Back in Austria, I worked in the startup industry for 10 years almost. Also, I did a lot of work experience in Singapore, Italy, Switzerland, London, and a bit of the US, and it was always startup related. So this was kind of my passion. I had my own startup back 5 years ago. And then I started to go into startup acceleration, so helping young entrepreneurs on their way. And this was also the linking point to Israel, because here it's like totally different. So Europe is like so far behind, really so don't judge me, but like it's like that. Like here the first time is like crazy, you know. So this is why I was like here all the time to actually work better on that. And I started an organization that was helping female entrepreneurs as a non-profit. So this is why it was kind of my passion to support women in the workplace when it comes to high tech and startups. And now I'm having my own company, which is also working with women and supporting them.
So you were in the previous episode where we talked about weddings, and then I asked Tanya if she knows anyone who can talk about women in the workplace, and of course Tanya said, "Are you kidding? That's my thing." And of course now you're here, and we're happy for that. So we're talking about women in the workplace, which is a huge subject. We can talk about women in any type of field, but I mean, because of the makeup of this panel, I guess it's going to be kind of bound to the high-tech entrepreneurship industry, okay, maybe business, things like that. So I want to start with a really broad question. In your culture, do you think there's still a stigma towards kind of strong business women, or is that starting to loosen or open up, or has it never been the case?
Well, I'm coming, I have the point of view of a startup culture, which I know might be different, depending on which context you're in. But even a few years ago, I participated in a program with the other startup founders, bringing together entrepreneurs in New York City, and I remember being the only woman in the room. I'm sure this is something that those of us around the table can relate to, being the only woman in whichever team you happen to be on. But I noticed even, in the past few years since that situation, a lot of that has changed, and there's more women in startup land, and I think that the industry has seen a lot of benefits from that. I think that also applies to the world of investing as well, where there's more women, not just on our side of the table, meaning the startups, but also on the other side of the table.
And as the single woman in the room, is there kind of a negative stereotype that you had to face, even now in that kind of industry?
Occasionally there's different expectations. It's not always negative. I think that there is a lot more of an open mind than there used to be.
Okay. Peggy, how does the Chinese culture see businesswomen? I've heard this story, and I don't know the name, and if I did, I'd probably butcher it, but I've heard that the most successful pirate in the world was a Chinese woman.
Yeah, and she's not only the pilot. She also drives the spaceship to the space. So.
No, pilot? I meant pirate.
Pirate?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. No.
I mean that's a bonus.
I'm from China, so when you're talking about pirate, it really has double meaning. So which kind of pirate?
Well, you know what? It's two for the price of one. But I've heard like the most successful pirate in the history, because if you think of pirates, you think of a man with a long beard.
Is that in an Asian dynasty? I remember the folklores.
I don't know the name. He was a real person. I don't remember the name.
Yeah,
and she plundered the 7 seas more than any man has ever plundered, but she rarely gets mentioned. I don't know why. So I want to ask, how is kind of the stereotype of a Chinese businesswoman, and has it changed throughout the years?
I think the situation in China, let's put aside the industry-related stereotypes. I would say that because China has both of a cultural root of like man being the dominating gender, but also contradictorily have this communistic/socialistic past, which men or women are both very motivated to engage actively in the workforce. So I wouldn't say that there's a very strong stereotype saying that there are jobs or leaderships that women can't do. In reality, I think right now in China, there are a lot of self-made billionaires that are women, even though the absolute percentage is still low compared to the men, but it's quite high on the global level compared to the rest of the countries. I think the socialistic / communistic past definitely contributed to that. There are many strong women, and many people admire this kind of role model of strong women, very high-level executives, really steering the wheel of large corporate. But I think likability of that person specifically, and admiring that women are strong in power, are different. You might admire a strong leader, a female leader of a large corporate of 50,000 people, but you might not necessarily want to be her friend or to marry her. So
And is it different
there's
with
a
men?
gap there.
Is it different with men? Do you think men kind of, stereotypically, of course, can kind of hold both, like have both ways, like also be a tough business guy, but also be a nice guy, whereas women are kind of considered that they have to choose?
I think it's much easier for men. They don't necessarily need to make the choice, and it's much hard for women, especially if you're very motivated and engaged in your workforce. If on your personal life you're not married until 50, or you're divorced, or you don't really have that much time to take care of your kids. Apparently, there are these old stereotypes from the society that, okay, you're not really a good mom and wife, but you're a very successful executive, but your life somehow is still incomplete.
I see. All right, Andrea?
I think in Taiwan, when I try to recall my previous working experiences in Taiwanese high-tech company, I remember most of the department is run by female leader. So for example, like marketing director is a woman, or supply chain department's leader is a woman, and they manages lots of guys. So I feel like it's very culturally accepting as long as you really drive performances. Because when it counts down performances, people don't really care about whether you are man or woman. That's why I think.
Okay, and talking about like stereotypically, is there kind of a is there a stereotype?
I think right now there's no specific stereotype, but of course when you didn't really have proper business performance, and then you are single, and you are like 45, and then you have bad temper, people might have extra negative attitude towards you. It's kind of like bad, super bad. That's what I think.
All right.
Well, actually, one thing that I want to say is that Brazil is such a big country that whatever I will say, it's just let's say the rich people, like higher levels of the society. I used to live in Rio, and almost all my life I worked in Rio or São Paulo also, which are the main cities in Brazil. Sorry, and there I could see a lot of women in leadership. I can remember several of my former managers, that they were very strong women, and I had always someone to target and look at this person and think, I want to be like her. I want to have a career like hers. I think talking about Rio and São Paulo, yes, we have this image, but outside these two main cities, it's completely different, and I cannot really talk about it.
All right. And Tanya, I want to ask you something, because I think when we think about, I'm not confusing Germany and Austria, but I mean, when I think of a strong woman, the image that comes to mind is Merkel, of course. And I think Europe has been open for the past few decades, to very, very strong women in politics and in industry, women who run countries, and I'm thinking, how does that affect the kind of stereotype that maybe used to exist about women in leading positions, not necessarily like strong independent women who work, but actually women who lead countries, lead industries, huge Fortune 500 companies. How does that change?
From my perspective, a lot of things comes down to role models. So I think Angela Merkel, also we have a chancellor now that is a female, I think this will change a lot, like also in terms of in the future, how you perceive it. However, I mean, also Austria is very patriarchy still. So I get, like, my opinion, like older white guys, they still will say a woman on top, you know, whatever. She cannot do it anyways. And also how many people actually said some bad things about Merkel, even though she's a great leader in my opinion, right? But still, I mean, it's guys, so they feel threatened. This is the thing of patriarchy, and I think Austria is still a big thing in that. But it gets better. So when it comes to actually what's really interesting, it's almost 50% of leaders that are starting their own company in Austria are women. So that's actually a big deal. But it's not that they're the face of the companies. Mostly they are just running in the back, and there's a guy, you know, doing sales and stuff. So a lot of family-owned businesses, the woman is doing all the things in the back, and it wouldn't work without her. And the guys know, but they would never, you know, say it. And in the startup scene, it's really bad there. So it's less than 10% mostly in women founders. It's changing, I think.
In the startup industry as opposed to the...
traditional. So the 50% is like all over for all industries, across everything. Of course, when it comes to large corporations, it's mostly still guys on top. But like those starting the companies and leading, it's like the small ones is still 50% almost. That's huge.
Okay. Let me ask you guys, what I'll say guys because I can't think fast enough. But what kind of industries do you think that have been traditionally closed, or not closed, but kind of like harder for women to get into, are starting to open up? And have you seen, when you grew up, kind of maybe in schools or vocational schools, these kind of different paths between where boys are supposed to go and where women are supposed to go? And, you know, like, or like girls in high school, they like boys are kind of pushed towards maybe like computers and high tech, and then girls are pushed towards, I don't know,
kindergarten,
care management or things like that. Have you ever seen that? Do you think it's kind of has it been a trend when you grew up? Do you think it's something that's changed? Where is it still relevant?
Can I start?
Yeah.
So in Brazil, it's a bit obvious, but the boys usually they like to play football, soccer. So this is the thing that I saw when I was a kid. And the guys were always like football. This is and I still have friends that they are fathers today. They work and they have like a team that they go and play football in the end of the day as a sport.
And women?
So it's very strong. Women, ballet.
Ballet?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't do it, but yes.
Yeah. I think now the U.S. is leading the world soccer field. I think her name is Megan Rapinoe. She's the captain of the U.S. Football team, and now she's like become a big star because they won the World Cup or the World Women's Cup. But I'm going to continue the question. Have you seen or kind of these changes in what industries have opened up to women lately, even in terms of how they're advertised or things like that?
I think police, maybe. Like there are more female police officers. They are, you know, equipped with gun and willing to like go to some really dangerous scene to catch the criminal. I think back in the days, because I think policemen is quite like not only mentally consumed job, but also like physically efforts required. So in the beginning, it was like only open to guys, or many guys joined that profession. But right now, I think because the diversity of career choice, lots of girls, one day they want to become policemen, they will just follow that route. So back in Taiwan, I actually see more and more female policewomen, to be honest.
Okay, that's interesting. Police.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
I think doctors for us.
Really?
Yeah, when I grew up there, it was like, you know, it wasn't a thing. But the women that were actually raising with me, they were like more into that. So it was a field that is actually worth, you know, fighting for.
Well, we'll take like a side tour because what you said. I think well, for men, there's certain fields where they kind of enhance this sense of male camaraderie. You know, like we're all policemen because we have this bond because we're in the same squad. we have the same, like firefighters or anything, obviously military, but also other industries, even like trucking and things like that, where you kind of men love to like center around like a kind of a task force or like a squad or something like that. So do you think, is there anything that youth can think of that's maybe that helps women enter these fields, or kind of are women adapting to that kind of mentality, or the other way around? Is it changing the kind of mentality of the place?
I think the fact that remote work, it has become so prevalent and mainstream and accepted that a lot of the flexibility that women in traditional roles of homemaking and motherhood and everything that goes along with that have generally needed and sometimes been judged or stigmatized or limited because of that, has allowed them or us to continue to move forward within their career without having to, sacrifice anything by virtue of being like at home.
Mm-hmm. All right. What about in the office or in the workplace itself? Like once a woman has overcome all the hurdles and now she's in a kind of a male-dominated society or within the office, are there any traditional roles that are still upheld, like the stereotypical the woman always brings the coffee or things like that? Have you ever noticed that even within the same unit, the same team, or even in the C-suite, if there's one woman, then she'll have to take on herself this kind of maybe a motherly role or maybe like a traditionally feminine role?
I think the main traditional role for women in Brazil is HR.
Mm.
But we actually thought into this topic because it was so interesting. Because women, in Austria at least, if we are in this position, if I have like equal important people, like C-level sitting on the same table, who is taking the notes? The woman. So it is like that, like, yeah, sure, I can take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
And once you notice the behavior in yourself, it's like, wait. And oftentimes guys are pointing out, why are you taking notes? Yeah, actually, why me? So, for us, it's like also, bringing coffee or taking the things away. So it's the things of caring, what women are basically doing mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And guys need to point it out often. So actually we realize, hey, this is not why I should, that's very interesting behavior. But it needs to start with us, We need to change that. We need to be aware.
All right. How about corporate or industry sensitivity towards women issues like maternity leave or mother-friendly jobs? How is that I think in Israel there's a maternity leave for 3 months, and then you can supplement that with another unpaid 3 months, which usually most women take. I don't know the rules about whether you can, if you take the other 3 months, if you come back, if you might not have a job. I don't even know the answer to that. But do you know how are the maternity leave rules, or kind of way? Maybe it's not just the rules, but kind of a tradition from where you were from?
I think at least the situation in China is pretty sad. I would say that in general, East Asians have a very harsh work ethics of working very long hours and be responsive almost 24/7, especially for mobile internet industry in the past few years. There are many women in the mobile internet industry in China. A lot of them are typically high-tech companies, but maybe the positions vary. However, men, women both have to work very long hours. Some of the executives even advocate for a 9-9-6 work schedule, meaning working from 9 to 9, 6 days a week. So that kind of nature and fierce competition at workplace naturally put both parents, men and women, in a very difficult situation. So if you have to sacrifice one person in the family, somebody has to actually go pick up the kid. Uh-huh. If you both work for this large kind of corporate environment, then somebody has to make a compromise. So usually it is the one, after calculation, that makes less salary per month. It sounds like a very rational calculation, but usually it is the man who makes more. Mm-hmm. And the women, the wives, the moms, will probably have to force to make a rational decision as to take a back step from their very demanding job and to work in positions that are less demanding. So that means whether you're going to maternity leave or you are a mom of one or two, that means that for sure there has to be a solution. So naturally there is the environment that divides the men jobs and women jobs that you have to balance.
So how difficult would it be to find like a mother-friendly job where you finish on time to go pick up the kids? It doesn't have to be a mother, but just like if you said traditionally, it's usually the woman. In a culture that glorifies the 12-hour work days, how prevalent are those kinds of jobs?
Well, I think it's a very hard life decision. If you want to be very achieved in your workplace, then of course, men or women, you have to make the compromise to be more dedicated. If you feel that in order to achieve a life-work balance, I would want to be more successful in my personal life, would want to spend more time on my kids, then I'm afraid that there isn't that a perfect balance between the life and work unless you are working remotely. Nowadays, we see a lot of e-commerce. Many women are working from home, whether it's from the social media e-commerce channels, drop shipping, etc. So there are ways that you can go around it. But if you want to be successful in a very traditional corporate sense, it's still very hard to balance.
Any thoughts?
Actually, I want to make a contrast because actually Brazil is very, very patriarch. And we have not only 4-month maternity leave, but a lot of companies are, I think this is a law that the companies need to start now to have 6-month maternity leave, and you can be without also earning any money for more 6 months, meaning you can be out for 1 year, 1 whole year. It's something very new, and can you imagine a person leaving her job for 1 year, 1 whole year?
And does she have a job to come back to?
Yes, but
by law, is it?
By law, exactly. So, but can you imagine? I cannot imagine.
Well, it's very, very
a lot.
progressive.
Yeah.
Very progressive.
Yeah. So, and the one thing that people are discussing a lot in Brazil now is okay. So the mother has 4 to 6 months, can go out maybe for a whole year, and what the father receives is 5 days. So it's unbalanced also, and especially in the case of gay parents. So how would they take care of
well, these rules are relatively new. I mean, all over the world, they're relatively new.
Yeah.
Women have only entered the workforce in the past maybe 100, 200 years. Traditionally, at least, and we're still kind of figuring out how to navigate work and life. And now people are saying, okay, we want to be very successful, but also we want to have, family life. Let's talk about: is there a kind of a dress code, especially in like big or high-tech industries, where women are expected to dress a certain way? Maybe sometimes, like, I know that women, they tend to dress in a bit more manly fashion to blend in, but then in other places is kind of, I wouldn't even say frowned upon, but it's kind of looked kind of weird if a woman dresses like a man. I don't want to name any specific cultures that I personally don't represent, but I know that some countries, women wear one thing, men wear another thing, and then other cultures where everybody kind of tries to wear the same thing so that there's no separation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I remember when in my previous companies, yes, the leader of some department, which are women, they tend to wear like pants, but I don't think I don't think they try to be manly, so they wear pants. It's more like their personality. I think when we talk about like, is there any dress code or not, it's really come down to whether this leader feel a sense of security in the workplace. Because if you really believe in your ability, why you need to dress like a man to blend in the workplace? You know what I mean? Unless you are in a very traditional workplace and you are a sales, and if you wear dresses to face some clients which are really low and traditional, they might feel like, oh, you're so sexy, see you in a non-professional way. So you might feel like, I need to wear pants to make sure that I look professional. So otherwise, I feel like the dress code itself is kind of like the terms people created.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what you said is I have to dress, I have to wear pants to seem more professional. You know, for certain cultures, I would think that it does that does equate. So if you dress, you wear pants and a suit, that means you're a professional. But maybe for some cultures, it means you're kind of dressing up and you're not portraying the traditional role that you are quote unquote supposed to portray. Like, oh, you should be wearing a female business suit or a skirt or a pants or these kinds of shoes, not other kinds of shoes. I don't know.
I think this also depends on which industry you're talking about. You have industries that you need to wear uniforms,
Mm-hmm.
and you have industries that for example, I still work for business consulting. So in Brazil, I needed to be fancier than the client. I need to wear fancier clothes to look a bit more professional or serious or with doesn't matter, but you need to look something that maybe you're not.
Well, here's I'll rephrase the question this way: when you have to pick a business suit or something that you wear for a business meeting, okay, let's say you have an important business meeting, do you give any thought to should it be pants and like a heavy jacket, or I actually want to wear a skirt with leggings and nice shoes, things like? Do you give any thought to that? Or is it whatever I feel like today?
No, I always wear shorts. Black, classic shorts.
Mm-hmm.
White topping black shorts to make sure that I look nice and professional at the same time.
Okay, so you're saying I'm choosing the middle road. It's not. I don't want to wear like a three-piece suit and but I also don't want to wear something that's completely different.
Yeah, I try to not sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
either one of the options.
I think there is nothing more freeing in terms of revolution in the past few years than the release of the expectation that women should wear heels every day to work, regardless of what industry or work you're actually doing. And like that small thing, and you see now professional business women and executives wearing comfortable shoes, and that's just again like a small thing that to me really like signifies like a change in mentality. Absolutely.
I think that's huge. You can really kind of assess the patriarchy of a culture or of an office culture by seeing that kind of, if women, I don't want to say are forced to, because you can wear whatever you want, but there is a kind of a conception that heels make a woman look better or more professional or more classy. Whereas now there's kind of this notion that no, you wear whatever you want that's comfortable and professional.
It looks better in men's eyes.
Yeah. Which is I kind of guess that is the idea behind why women are kind of, they feel the need to wear that in a male-dominated industry. Right?
Yes, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Never felt that luckily.
Never?
In the startup scene, it doesn't matter. You can go in sneakers and nobody cares.
Yeah, the
right?
startup scene is very different.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's like the freedom of it. But now that you saw it, like I went to an event here to a law firm, and like the first time ever I saw like all the women there super dressed up in those heels, and I'm like, fuck, I couldn't. So if I want to, sure, that's great. But like having that on every day, like this is so expensive, like every day.
so it's very industry dependent.
Yeah,
you're
definitely.
saying. All right.
It's a tax too, because you have to spend so much money on all of that, and working in an environment that requires you to look a certain way.
It's peer pressure. If everyone else is wearing heels as a woman, then you want to do the same.
Yeah,
all right.
Same.
What about, I know there's a lot of discussion about questions that you might be asked in a job interview, okay? And I know that I think in the US it's either illegal or kind of frowned upon to ask certain questions like, are you planning on getting pregnant in the next few years? What is your relationship status? Or I don't know if you can elaborate on that. What is the status on that in the US?
In general, I don't know all of the laws, although we are hiring now in the U.S. But generally, staying away from any of those kind of like personal questions. Even something simple like, are you married, is like, borderline. And that's also, it's a little bit counterintuitive or like ironic, because in general labor laws in the United States are much more protective of the employer rather than the employee. It means that that anything that can go wrong falls into the category of potential discrimination. So there are kind of dangerous kind of lines that are sometimes not so clear, but on the other hand are very dangerous if they're crossed. And something that like I've noticed that I do think it's important kind of to point out is that sometimes when regulations or even like cultural norms are in place ostensibly for the protection of women or another kind of like another minority group or vulnerable group or whatever, it can often backfire to the detriment of the person that or people that it's supposed to protect. So for example, like we were discussing before, maternity leave, laws and and expectations and things like that. I think that the trend toward, paternity leave and even advocacy for things like the option of leave that has nothing to do with having a child, meaning it's a kind of an equal ground, has the possibility of releasing some of the stereotypes that come along with having a child or requesting maternity leave, because it's equal then to everyone. So there's none of that kind of additional stigma potentially attached.
All right. I'm not a woman. I'm not going to even try and represent, but I know that in Israel there are certain questions that you're not supposed to ask when you're conducting a job interview. Nonetheless, I've heard on numerous accounts that people still ask them, either because they don't really know the rules or because, you kind of get away with it if it's it seems like a familiar enough environment. And if you want the job, you answer the question because you'd rather answer, even if it's inconvenient, and then get the job than risk not getting the job just because you are you don't even have to be offended by the question, but just because you don't think that question should be asked. So I'm asking, like, how are these kind of ideas, do they even exist, and how strictly are they upheld in your cultures?
So in Austria, it's also forbidden to ask those questions. But I mean, I'm also an employer, and I do get it why you want to ask those questions. Because if this person is planning to get a kid in 6 months, I really want to know. And especially in the startup scene, this can destroy like the company. If you cannot fire them. Also, you want to support, but you need to pay them, even though they cannot work for you. So I think this is kind of a clash also in interest when it comes to employers, because you should be on the same page with the employee. Yeah. But you don't need to answer in Austria if you asked, and then you can sue them. Yeah.
All right.
And because we love rules, we know what is asking those.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to transition into a less convenient topic. We'll talk about how seriously are sexual harassment claims treated. I'm guessing in the US they're usually treated very, very severely, but I'll let you answer. How is that viewed? How is the atmosphere, regarding that issue? Like in general, in broad terms, of course.
Yeah. I think we're living in like specifically a time period of like a post or ongoing like of a Me Too environment where those kind of accusations or realities are taken very seriously, and some would say too seriously, where you're creating, unfortunately, like an atmosphere of fear as well. So I think there's definitely a balance that as time goes on, I think that...
Do you sense this kind of sensitivity as in an American workplace? That there's always people are very...
Well, men are afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's unfortunate. Men that I've had, contact in business with have expressed that although their intentions can be very good, they're still can feel like they're in this kind of atmosphere of fear that they can't approach a woman. There's also the flip side where like a lot of us know in our generation and also in our parents' generation where people met at work, you know, and it's you're spending all of your time in the office, a lot of us are, and that's a place where generally as an adult, like you might you can meet someone who can become your partner for life, but in an atmosphere where people are afraid to approach each other, there can be a lot of love that's lost.
All right.
And I see that as kind of
we might
potential
talk about
unfortunate.
office relationships if we
Yeah.
have time.
Okay.
But I want to hear from you guys. Does that also that movement that started in the U.S. does that affect the working culture in Austria and in China and Taiwan, and Brazil? Do you feel that kind of the sensitivity? Some might even call it hypersensitivity, or at least a change in the way it used to be, or the other way around. Is it no? There's still some things that shouldn't be tolerated, but they still are because of the kind of a cultural inertia.
I think even workplace, let's say, if there's some sexual harassment in a company and then the management didn't do anything to that guy, assuming it's a guy, then the girl, which is a victim, can have lots of ways to make it public by posting on Facebook, like have some like news reference to make sure that her event can be known by everyone else.
I mean, when you look at like movies from the 50s and you see how people treated women in the office, calling them names, calling them by their body parts, that kind of culture, I would hope has been is long gone. But I'm assuming that it doesn't just stop overnight, or if not even over half a century. That there are still some kind of a residue of that kind of culture, very male-dominated societies, where even if it's kind of maybe on the border of sexual harassment by what the law claims, but still you see it very prevalent in the workplace. Have you ever noticed that?
I mean, in the startup scene, it's such a bro culture, I think, and this is also what we discussed in the last years, how we can actually, do something against it. But like the thing is, it's a very friendly atmosphere, right? Everyone is hanging out after work, and it's very just easygoing. So this is why the line is so thin or so grayish in general, and it's hard to find a wife. And also my business partner, for example, found his wife in one of the events, and I mean, it's like for them it's like hard now because, as you said, how to really get along with all this Me Too. However, I think especially in the startup scene there needs to be protection, that kind of thing. Also when it comes to investors, and you cannot go to HR to complain, because usually you're just like 4 or 5 people. So if the boss is making all the time like comments about how nice you're dressed and how gorgeous you're looking, it can make you feel uncomfortable. And if you're depending on the job, you need someone to stand up for you. So I think especially in that kind of culture we need to find the rules, and it's still there.
All right, I want to ask one more question before we head on to the next part. But what about like gender neutral language? Because in Israel, in the Hebrew languages, and there's a feminine and a masculine for every verb and for every pronoun. So a lot of the times people are very careful how you address, like I call you guys because I don't know a better word and I'm backwards. But there is a lot of sensitivity sometimes towards the kind of language you use, and I know that in the U.S., because I only speak English and just a little bit of German, and ein bisschen, and I know that there's a lot of sensitivity towards saying, instead of saying a policeman, say a police person, or an HR, kind of that kind of language. I know an interesting, like the story is, have you ever heard of there's a book called The Awful German Language by Mark Twain. Have you heard of that? Well, we'll talk about that later. Well, about how in German language you only become a woman when you're a Fräulein or a Frau, and then Fräulein is still kind of a neutral pronoun. Have you ever said what kind of changes? I don't know even if Chinese has.
We don't.
You don't have the kind of.
In Portuguese, we do have.
And does it affect the working culture?
I think we are used to see like talking as if you're talking with a man.
And that's not changing any.
No.
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 And in Austria?
I mean, same. as you know. But I think, I don't know if you heard, but like in our national anthem, we are only singing for like guys, so we only mention guys. So there was a huge debate a couple of years ago that we should change to actually include women in there as well. And then everyone was like, we cannot change the national anthem. So it was, I don't even know if it changed now, but it was huge because of that.
All right.
So, yeah, and it's a rule thing. You need to gender everything basically with us.
Yeah.
So,
That's like a one of my most favorite topics to talk about, like how language affects everything. And now we're heading into our rapid fire question. I'm going to ask everyone the same question. I want you to answer as fast as you can regarding something from your local culture. We're going to start with Sarah. All right. Local slang word for cool. Sarah. Excluding the word cool.
I don't know. I just don't know any slang anymore, so I have to pass.
La Fong.
La Fong? All right. What does it literally mean?
Word by word translation is like pulling the wind. I guess it's a way of saying cool.
Okay.
Kind of related.
Interesting.
Diao.
Yeah. And what does that mean?
Is that even loud?
Diao actually means dick.
Okay.
But when you say like you are so dick, it actually literally when you translate into Mandarin, it's like you're so cool.
Well, that's a male-dominated language right there.
What can I say?
So as I said, I'm from Rio, so I can say how you can say cool in Carioca, maneiro.
Maneiro.
Which is cool.
All right. And?
I think I would only say it in English, so same like awesome, but like there's a German word, a Viennese word, which is Oida.
Oida.
Yeah, there's a video, you should link that, because you can use Oida for every situation. If you're pissed, if you think it's cold, then you just say Oida. So
all right. Okay, and I want you to name one strong female businesswoman, whatever, politician, whatever you want, from your local culture that you think of as a role model.
Peggy Johnson. She's number 2 at Microsoft.
All right.
Head of business development.
Lao Ganma. She is her real name is Tao Huabi. She made herself a self-made billionaire woman at the age of 60 plus, and with very underprivileged background, starting from a very small village, and then became the most well-sold spicy sauce brand in China.
Ooh, all right. Cool. We'll have a link to all that.
Yes.
Tsai Ing-wen, which is the president of Taiwan, she just legalized same-sex marriage.
Yeah, the first country in Asia to do so.
Yes.
Nice.
I would say Maria Bastos. She was the CEO of a metallurgy company. Basically, she ran a lot of men, so very strong.
All right.
Michaela Novak-Chaid. She's the CEO of HP, Hewlett-Packard in Austria, and such a humble and great person and mother, and she's coming from the same town like I do. So.
All right. Okay. So with that, we conclude our episode for today, and I want to thank you. You were amazing. You guys, you ladies, you women, whatever you want. You were amazing. It was super interesting. Of course, we can talk about this forever. I want to thank everyone who was listening, and of course, you can find us on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube and on every Spotify, every podcast app. And if you like the episode, then we ask you, please just put like a thumbs up, and maybe tell a friend, share it, subscribe if you like. And if you come from another country and you have something to say, then we really want to hear from you. So just type in the comments wherever you're listening if you have any questions or you have any comments. We'd love to hear that. And I hope to see you on the next episode.